This is History for Cocktail Parties with hack historians Thornton Kennedy and James Ottley.
Well, good afternoon, James. How are we doing?
Doing great, man. How about yourself?
I'm excited about part 2 of our Masters podcast, History for Cocktail Parties.
I am too. Let's get into it.
Yeah, Masters is taking place right now. I've got my green cup. James, you're not wearing your Masters hat today.
I should go get it.
We should pause and go get your Masters hat immediately. Well, I think we had gotten to Augusta.
We
did.
In
our last episode.
We did, and that's where we're going to start back up. Just a little bit of brief history on Augusta. It was actually Oglethorpe that commissioned it, sent surveyor Noble Jones in 1736 up the Savannah River to build a town and a fort. And the town gets its name from a German royal who had recently married Frederick of England, who later gave birth to King George III,
really?
Believe it or not. And the name of that princess she was the Princess of Saxe-Gotha, which sounds, I guess, a little bit like Augusta.
Is that where the name comes from? Her name was not Augusta, it was the Princess of...
Something like that. And the book also said that she was a homely princess.
Not a good-looking girl.
Not a beauty, apparently. But as you mentioned, Augusta went on to become an industrial center. It was in part because of the canal that they
It had initially been agricultural like everything else. You would take your cotton there, you would put it on the river, ship it down to Savannah, and it would be shipped across the ocean, I guess. And so it was more of a cotton clearinghouse up until Eli Whitney gives us the cotton gin. And then when that happens, they decide to go all in on manufacturing.
Right. And at the time, canals were the interstate of that time, early 80s. Everybody wanted one. The success of the Erie Canal, it was a business incubator.
One of your favorite facts about the city of Atlanta was it was not just railroads. There was also an idea to build a canal to Tennessee.
That's exactly right. Proved not to be practical, but when the Board of Public Works was looking into building a railroad, they also asked Fulton to see, hey, would a canal also work?
Canals were the thing, and Augusta did it.
They sure did, and that led to there becoming an industrial hub, which in turn led to them playing a major role in the Civil War because they had an arsenal there. They had a powder works. The powder works manufactured 2.7 million pounds, or tons, I should say, of gunpowder during the Civil War. That's a lot. They also had factories there that made denim, shoes. They supplied the Confederacy during the war, which leads me to kind of an interesting story or a question that still remains somewhat unresolved. Sherman did not attack Augusta, even though it was absolutely a huge prize, and it's been debated ever since why he didn't, which again leads us back to a theme that we seem to continually hit on.
Was it about a woman?
It was about a woman, or at least that's how the legend goes.
Always about a woman.
Indeed. So Sherman actually had been stationed at that arsenal 20 years earlier.
Sure.
He was a lieutenant at that time. He was single. Yeah. And from my research, it said that his marriage proposal to his gal back in Ohio had been received lukewarm. And so he was there, he was young, single, and on the town. And the legend has it is that he had a girlfriend, had a love interest there, and possibly even a love child.
Whoa.
And that he didn't attack the town, the city,
because
to spare them. Oh my gosh. Historians have said,
no salacious rumors in History for Cocktail Parties.
That's what this is all about. Half of this stuff we're making up anyway, so.
It's true.
But Sherman later said, no, it wasn't because of that. He said his guys were ready to have at South Carolina, quote, get to those dirty bastards who had started the war in the first place.
There you go.
Close quote.
So the indigo piece is important because that is what that piece of property was in 1851, I think, was a gentleman named Dennis Redmond was taking advantage of this industrial revolution, and he found 365 acres on a dirt road west of town.
365 or 364?
Oh, my gosh.
Keep going.
Good. Let's go 365, and we'll fact check in the notes. And started an indigo plantation. The main building of that indigo plantation, finished in 1857, was thought to be the first concrete building in the country.
I did not know that.
Yeah, like foot-thick walls.
Now, I probably should know this, but indigo, what is indigo?
You got me there. I think it's just a plant that produces that blue
Color.
Okay. It was denim.
Got it.
So it's
Right.
that-
They had a denim mill.
Yeah,
Actually,
they would make. I think it's blue jeans or some variation thereof.
Sorry about that.
No, it's no problem at all. So his enterprise failed. He was not successful, but he sells the property to Louis Matthew Berkmans.
With an S.
With an S, Berkmans. And what did the Berkmans do on that property there, James?
They had an ornamental tree nursery there, as I understand it.
That's right. And it was the first large-scale horticultural nursery in the southeastern United States.
Did they grow fruit trees there?
I think that's why they called it Fruitland Nursery. There it is. It was he and his son Prosper. Right. I love the name Prosper Berkmans.
And I've got a little story about him when we get to it. Keep going.
It was to your point. They grew many varieties of exotic fruit trees, flowering shrubs, and flowers, which they shipped all over the country. And I'm on to his son's passing, and the next thing. So tell me the story on the Berkmans.
Well, as you said, they did, sell to, or the property was going to be, and it actually was, sold to this financier and hotelier, J. Perry Stoltz. And his intention was to build a hotel and resort there, a golf course on the defunct Berkman's Nursery. Commodore Stoltz, as he was named, came to town, and actually they got pretty far along with the plans. He moved to town, he enrolled his son in Richmond Academy, and finalized his plans for the project. He planned to build a hotel behind the manor house, and it was going to be called the Fleetwood Hotel. But they started it, but they, of course, didn't get to complete it. I think you know this part of the story. His workers actually dug foundations near the ground that would later become the 9th and 18th greens and the 1st and 10th tees, putting in, digging the foundations. But before the concrete trucks got there, a hurricane occurred in Florida and wiped out his hotel there and all his money, and that was the end of that.
Yeah. And that's one of those moments of what would have happened if the Fleetwood Hotel had been built on the Fruitlands Nursery. There would be no Augusta National. There'd be no golf tournament in Augusta, Georgia.
Obviously, a butterfly flapped its wings in some part of the world, causing the hurricane.
And it was around this time that Bob Jones and Cliff Roberts, obviously the great golfing legend Bobby Jones, Cliff Roberts, the financier from New York. We talked about how they met. In my understanding of it, Cliff Roberts was a bit of a fanboy and just was caught up in Bobby Jones's southern demeanor and just his celebrity. And Bob Jones was looking for a suitable site for a new golf club. He was one of the most famous sporting faces in the world. And he was simply wanted to build a private golf course where he and his friends could enjoy.
Somewhere that was private.
Someplace that was private. And he could, I'd always heard that he had this famous temper. And he liked to occasionally toss a golf club. But because he was this great public figure, he couldn't express those emotions on a public golf course. So he needed a place where he might be able to swear a little if he mishit a shot.
Got it. And Augusta was actually Cliff's idea. He suggested that Augusta was the logical place for it. He said it was warmer than Atlanta, which is probably true. If you've ever been to Augusta in the summer or taken the Peterson Boat Canal tour, it's like being on the sun.
James, have you done the Peterson Canal
I actually
boat
have.
tour?
I have, and I highly, highly recommend
Interesting.
it. Just not in the middle of the summer, maybe a different time of year. But Augusta was close by, so to speak, by train, had rail lines, plenty of hotel rooms, and other golf courses.
Because it was a resort town.
It was actually built on money from liver pills and hair dye. There was a guy named Dr. William Tutt, who manufactured Tutt's liver pills and other snake oils. And once he made his money there, he had the idea, his next big idea was to draw moneyed travelers down from the north. And so he was the one that actually built the Bon Air Hotel in 1889, put in an 18-hole golf course. It said it was a sand green golf course, I will come back to that after. I was intending to look that up, but I mean, could that probably somebody does know.
Time makes fools of us all.
Indeed. Built that in 1901. There was a tennis court, swimming pool, and riding trails. And Dr. Tutt advertised Augusta as the future playground of the country.
Huh.
He said it's 24 hours from Chicago, also 24 hours from New York, and I quote, "It was France with her chateau district has nothing to offer like Augusta." That was on the advertising circular. Other entrepreneurs followed suit. Partridge Inn was built across the street. And we mentioned that, I think we mentioned the Bon Air Hotel. It was owned by ultimately purchased by the Vanderbilt hotel chain.
That's right.
And Bobby Jones and his father liked to stay in the Vanderbilt hotels. And that's how they got to know Walt Marshall, who was the president of the Vanderbilt hotel chains. Walt was a bridge and golf buddy of Cliff Roberts in New York. And that's how that introduction came about.
And, of course, Jones had a long association with Augusta, Georgia. I previously mentioned that his wife, Mary Rice Malone, was born in Augusta. But did you know that in 1930, the year that he wins the Grand Slam, Augusta Country Club in Forest Hills Golf Course hosted the Southern Open? And did you know that
did not.
Bobby Jones won that tournament in 1930, defeating Horton Smith?
So multiple connections to Augusta there, in addition to, I think we mentioned that Cliff Roberts was stationed there during World War I in our first episode.
Yeah.
I also heard that, and this was apparently, I mean, I didn't hear it firsthand, but apparently in the book I read, an anonymous employee said, well, they also looked in Cobb County.
What?
Yeah, according to this anonymous employees, and they could not find suitable acreage, and so when they came across the Fruitlands defunct nursery, apparently Bobby Jones said, "Perfect." It was almost like Brigham Young finding Salt Lake, the Great Salt Lake.
It's like that Fox Creek little par 3 over there off of Windy Hill. That could have been Augusta National.
I mean, who can say?
Who can say? I mean, don't fact check us at all. But did we talk about the gentleman Thomas Barrett Jr., who was a mutual friend of Cliff Roberts and Bobby Jones,
future mayor of Augusta,
and he was the one who found the allegedly 365-acre property,
give or take.
So. They formed the Fruitlands
Manor Corporation.
They took an option on the property for $70,000. One of the big investors was Colonel Jones. Bobby Jones's father was one of the early supporters. So they had the property, they had the architect, they knew McKenzie was the guy because of the story you had told earlier. But it was also embedded in that idea of the old course at St. Andrews, which both McKenzie and Bobby Jones loved. And I have a great quote from McKenzie on that, talking about St. Andrews and sort of his ideals of what a golf course should be. "I doubt if even in 100 years' time a course will be made which has such interesting strategic problems and which creates such enduring and increasing pleasurable excitement and varied shots. St. Andrews is a standing example of the possibility of making a course which is pleasurable to all classes of golfers, not only the 30 handicap players, but to the plus 14 man, if there ever was or will be such a person." So it's the idea of a golf course that is challenging for high-level players as well as enjoyable for hacks like you and me.
Not that we'll ever get the chance to play it.
I have played Augusta National, for the record.
Come on.
McKenzie met the Augusta National Golf Club committee at the Vanderbilt Hotel in New York City on July 10th. That's where he was likely offered and accepted the chance to design the course. Before he even got there, he drew a schematic of what the golf course could possibly look like, having never seen the piece of property. A couple days after that meeting, Jones and McKenzie played the Bayside course on Long Island, which he had also recently designed, so that helped lock it in there. He arrived in Augusta, McKenzie did, July 14th for a 3-day visit, and that was the first time he walked the grounds. And on that first time of walking the grounds of Augusta National Golf Course, he set out the tees and the greens.
Come on.
Yeah. His first time walking, he knew exactly where the tee boxes were going to be and knew exactly where the greens were going to be.
That's wild.
I know.
So construction started in November 1931, not mistaken.
Can we back up real quick? Because it is so interesting to me that we sort of skip over the fact that in 1929, the global economy collapsed. The Great Depression occurs. So in 1931, when these guys are setting out to build a golf course, Kinsey told Cliff Roberts, who was a little tight, "You will never be able to build a cheaper golf course than right at this moment."
Makes a lot of sense.
Labor was cheaper, goods were cheaper, everything was cheaper except for the fact that nobody had
Nobody had
any money. And we find out that Cliff Roberts has huge difficulties repaying those loans and trying to get solid financial footing.
Well, and that's just the start. He ended up, the club actually ended up being foreclosed upon in 1935. I'll mention that in a minute. I want to talk about the fact that in 1931 they completed the course in 124 days.
Like the shortest period ever at that time for building a golf course.
And when you count in rain delays for construction, the course was actually built in 76 days.
Wow.
Kind of a funny story. I don't know if it was a miscommunication or he just waited to the last minute. But apparently Prosper Berkmans and some of his buddies or crew were seen sprinting in front of the steam shovels, transplanting, digging up and transplanting about 4,000 small trees and bushes. And, he had been born on the property.
Yes.
It was his. And so, like I said, I just wonder how did they wait till the very last minute to do that? Maybe a miscommunication.
Well, here's a little note on that. It might be true. In 1931, when they started the creation of the golf course, two sons of Prosper Berkmans, Prosper Jr. And Louis Berkmans, assisted in the landscape design of the course. So they were actually out there to the point of making. And I think a lot of those original Fruitland Nursery plantings are still on the golf course.
That's my understanding.
To this day.
Yeah, I think that's really cool.
It's insane. So the golf course cost, I think it was $100,000 was budgeted.
Keep going. I've got the same facts.
So $100,000 budgeted. They came in under budget. There was an additional $15,000 they spent on sort of, I don't know what the additional $15,000 was, but they came in on time and under budget. They just couldn't pay any of their bills.
Right. And in the construction process, we talked about Alistair, McKenzie. He was the architect. But there was one change to hole number 9.
Yeah, that's a great story.
When Roberts actually only visited the construction site just one time. And when he did, he went to the 9th hole and he paced out about 220 yards, which is about where he expected his typical drive to land. He found that there was an unpleasantly sloped area there. And he hated the idea of a downhill sloping site there, landing site, and so he had the whole redone so that his drives would land and sit rather than slope off or roll off to the side. That was
his lone contribution to the golf
exactly.
course, except for he got really persnickety with Alistair McKenzie, who was more of an artist. He was not exacting, and Cliff Roberts really wanted those things to be exact representations of what he was doing. And Alistair McKenzie would say, well, this might happen, that Roberts did not like that.
He wanted
to know exactly how this distance was going to work, what this was going to be. So they clashed a little bit. And also, Alistair McKenzie usually got a fee of $10,000 to design a golf course. He lowered that fee to $5,000 and only got $2,000.
Is that right? I also
they had a really hard time getting that bill paid.
Well, it was the Depression.
It was.
Said that, McKenzie designed the course, but Jones was a big hitter and played a high hook. And so the preponderance of dog-legged left holes on Augusta National and the tremendous advantages it offered to the long driver, particularly on the par 5s, could not have been a coincidence.
Wow.
That quote as well.
I love that.
So Jones played the course the first time in August of 1932 and shot 72.
Wow, that's amazing.
Keep going.
Well, do you know what role the U.S. Open plays in the formation of the Masters Golf Tournament?
I know that it was during the summer.
Yeah? Okay.
I'll let you.
Herbert Walker Bush's father, Prescott Bush, was the head of the committee of the U.S. Golf Association. Okay. Cliff Roberts very cleverly invites him down to play a round of golf at Augusta and plants this idea of hosting the U.S. Open at Augusta.
I mean, this was just months after the course.
Months. I mean, 6 months after it was over. It was the craziest scheme. You couldn't possibly have, he couldn't have bitten on it. But this was something that stuck in Bob Jones's craw, was that none of the major tournaments had been played in the South. And he thought Augusta National could remedy that. So Bob Jones was 100% on board with lobbying the USGA to hold the U.S. Open at Augusta National.
But it was Cliff's idea, right?
It was Cliff's idea. Cliff, in his book, makes it sound like it was Prescott Bush's idea, but it was really Cliff had planted that seed. The USGA comes back eventually and says, hey, in a few years, sure, once your club is a little bit more established. They didn't like playing it that early in April, which was the right season.
Okay. I had heard that usually at that time it was held during the summer.
Yes, it was always held during the summer.
And the Augusta National was not open during the summer.
Is that right?
And so at that point they said, well, let's start our own tournament.
Well, right. So the U.S. Open passes. They don't get it.
Okay.
And for Cliff Roberts, this was a huge blow. He would never admit it, but he needed those headlines. Mm-hmm. He needed that tournament to drive membership, to drive revenue. Right. And when the U.S. Open passed, he was really in a pickle.
Desperate.
So he comes up with this idea, okay, we're going to host our own tournament. Gotcha. And we're really going to lean on Bob Jones's celebrity. And he founds what he originally, he wanted to call it the Masters right out of the gate.
And Bob Jones he thought that was immodest. He didn't like that at all. And in fact, Bob Jones came up with his own name, the
Augusta National Invitation Tournament, or is there something else?
Yeah, something similar to that. And he called it by that name. He said he called it the so-called Masters up until 1960.
I love that. That's such a great little aside. But Cliff Roberts, in his manipulative way, when the press would write about the golf tournament in that first year in 1934, they referred to it as the Masters.
That's right.
It kept appearing in press.
It was on the programs for the first couple of years, and the invitations had Jones's. It was the annual invitation tournament, I believe, was the name that Bobby Jones wanted it to be called.
And do you know why it was an invitation?
Let's hear it.
It was an invitation because it was very important to Bob Jones that he continue to be seen as an amateur. He did not want to play in a pro golf tournament. And he had turned pro because he did those promotional videos for Warner Brothers or whatever.
Right.
So he was technically a pro, but if it was invitation, there would be no qualifier. He could just be invited, and if the committee so selected him to be among the top 50 golfers, he would accept the invitation and play in the tournament.
Well, that's interesting because he didn't want to play in the tournament at first. And Cliff had to talk him into it on the first one.
Well, that was part of Cliff's manipulation. And Cliff does say, had the U.S. Open been held there, having Bob Jones play in that tournament would have been really, really big for his membership. He was really laser focused on growing Augusta National. First Masters golf tournament was held in 1934. Bob Jones did play in it, but it'll shock you to know after not playing in a tournament in 4 years, he did not win. Pressed on, Cliff Roberts later wrote that he putted poorly, and that's why he did not win that first Masters. It was won by a man named Horton Smith. The prize money at that time in 1934 was $1,500, and it was $1,500, and they couldn't pay it.
Huh.
Cliff Roberts had to pass the hat among the membership in order to make Horton Smith whole after winning the first Masters golf tournament.
Well, at that time, they didn't, it wasn't what it is today, and they had trouble with attendance. I heard they had to give the badges away, that it was almost like a civic duty in Augusta to buy the badges. I heard that Cliff inflated the numbers of the patrons, the people that actually attended, and that the Augusta Chronicle would print it unashamedly.
It was it's revered. It was Bob Jones playing in front of these huge galleries, and you're telling me there were like 3 or 4 people standing out there, and it was just the way the newspapers reported it?
Yeah, apparently. I don't know if it was 3 or 4, but, maybe it was more than that. But, it's just hard to imagine.
But overall, the tournament does have the desired effect, which is it got headlines because Bobby Jones played in a golf tournament.
Right.
It put Augusta National on the map. And very importantly for Cliff Roberts, it netted 20 new members. That was part of having these golf tournaments, was to increase membership. And those 20 new members added $6,000 to the coffers.
Well, they needed it, but they still didn't have enough to pay their expenses and all of their bills. I mentioned earlier that it's just hard to believe, but Augusta National was foreclosed on. In 19, very few people.
The creditors just said, "This is a horrible idea. We're done."
Well, they were tired of not being paid.
Right.
And so
he couldn't service the debt, and I think, in fact, that. Go ahead.
That triggers something. No, go ahead.
Oh, well, I was going to say $6,000 that they earned off those memberships went straight into making interest payments.
Is that right?
Yeah. There were no physical improvements to the plant. It was just past due interest payments.
And I think they were still ended up being a year and a half behind on their payments. So in June of 1935, the property was sold on the courthouse steps on the first Tuesday of the month. The creditor was Georgia Railroad Bank and Trust, and it was knocked off for $30,000. As I understand it, consortium of club members bought the club back, and they put it under the name of Augusta National
Right, and that's how you go from Fruitlands Manor Corporation to Augusta National Company. Cliff Roberts, we haven't touched on this yet, but tragically, Alistair McKenzie died a few months before the golf tournament. He was destitute. He had not made any money off of building the golf course because Cliff Roberts could not pay his fee, and Alistair McKenzie was constantly writing letters to Cliff Roberts not complaining, but in a very gentlemanly, scholarly way, sort of ribbing him, saying, I'm going to be thrown out, I'm going to be in the poorhouse if I can't be paid for this work. They figure out a way to get him $2,000. They write him some creditor notes
shut him up.
that he can go and sell. Okay. So he has this note that says, due upon receipt, and he would sell those to other people, which Cliff Roberts figured as kind of a bridge way to do it. He told him, he said, do not sell those in Augusta because everyone will know it's not worth anything. So he sold them in California. So the wife, Alistair McKenzie's wife, writes a very nice note to Cliff Roberts right before the golf tournament. He says, I know you all wish that Alistair could be there to see this golf tournament. And Roberts writes her a few weeks later and says, the tournament was a smashing success. We got all these new members, but the reality was it didn't even begin to cover the amount of money they had spent putting the tournament on. They had to redo the greens. They had to build bleachers. They had to do all of these improvements. Scoreboards. They had to put scoreboards all over the golf course. They had to put trash cans in. Right. So they spent all this money improving the golf course for the patrons. So they actually ended up really in the red after the tournament.
But that's not the end of the story. Bobby Jones and Cliff Roberts turned the tournament around. It becomes one of the most successful in the history of golf, and we'll tell that story on our next episode on the Masters. Thank you for listening to History for Cocktail Parties with hack historians James Ottley and Thornton Kennedy. Please like and subscribe, and now that the episode's over, you can go pour yourself another round, and we'll catch you next time.